Veremos cómo están entrando en entender el mundo de las emociones tanto los neurólogos como los biólogos. Y sobre todo, la teoría de Darwin está completamente descartada. No nos hemos desarrollado al azar y sobrevive el más fuerte, sino que hay un plan específico de evolución y de cambios en el ADN, que ahora comienza a tomarse en cuenta por la biología. Entenderemos que si el ADN puede cambiar por medio de vibración intencionada por un individuo o por medio de adaptación a los cambios del medio ambiente, la percepción del medio ambiente, de hecho ya se sabe que todo el universo es un yin y un yang. Lo que se expande tiene que contraerse. Y asimismo, una misma proteína nutre órganos diferentes en situación de estrés y de protección que en situación de relajación y crecimiento. Todo es protección o crecimiento, solo que nuestro entorno social nos tiene más tiempo en estrés y confunde este proceso de crecimiento. En el fondo, cómo se relacionan las moléculas es porque tienen formas que encajan, que se acoplan, que tienen una polaridad negativa y positiva, y siempre tiene que ir lo negativo con lo positivo, no lo negativo con lo negativo. Ahí se rechaza. Siempre encaja la polaridad negativa con la positiva. Lo más importante en esta vida para mantener la capacidad de rejuvenecimiento es esta capacidad de ser flexible en nuestro cuerpo y en nuestro cerebro. Lo que es muy importante de tomar en cuenta. Os digo, la flexibilidad de tu adaptabilidad es la verdadera medida de tu inteligencia. Os lo repito, la flexibilidad de tu adaptabilidad es la verdadera medida de tu inteligencia. Lo que es muy importante de tomar en cuenta. Os digo, desde ahora decidimos que una mayoría de seres humanos en el planeta Tierra han tomado ya conciencia de navegar la nave Tierra Gaia a los mejores resultados posibles. Que no tenemos miedo al cambio, que le damos la bienvenida y que vamos a proyectar al futuro del 2012-2013 en un renacer extraordinario y positivo en el despertar de la conciencia global y la unión del pensamiento y la acción hacia una posibilidad de recuperar el paraíso perdido de Gaia. Darnos confianza unos a otros, ser generosos y sobre todo unirnos por amor, que al final es lo que más influye en las emociones humanas y lo único que de verdad hemos venido aquí a aprender, el amor en todas sus posibilidades y manifestaciones. Así sea, así sea.
We live in an illusory world. That is that and I believe this has been proven quite true through quantum physics, that this world that we live in, this 3D or 4D dimensional world that we experience through our limited senses, is an illusion. That in fact, when you get down to the quantum level, that's the subatomic level of reality, it doesn't behave in any way the way that the material reality behaves. And if you were to blow up an atom the size of this building, there would be mostly just space. So, you know, we are made up of atoms and subatomic particles, electrons, and these electrons behave in ways that that nothing else that we know of behaves except the supernatural. We find ESP amongst electrons, and we find the most interesting thing that there is no separation at the subatomic level. Everything is one. There's no difference between one electron and another, and they're all encoded with the same information that would allow them to replicate the whole universe, it seems. This is theory, but this is good quantum theory. And this is exactly what mystics have been trying to tell us for so many years, that the world is an illusion and that the real world and universe is non-physical. And that's where we come from, and that's where we go. There are abilities that we have built into ourselves, into our bodies, to really penetrate this illusion and see what is on the other side. And that's what shamanism is all about. The opening of the third eye is the way that shamans and psychics are able to transverse our reality and see through the illusion of the physical reality. The shamans are actually communicating with the consciousness of the DNA molecule. That DNA molecule has consciousness. DNA is an extraordinary mystery. It is so complex that we can barely understand it. It has been called a code, a text. Parts of the DNA molecule have been called robots and self-replicating robots. It is extraordinarily sophisticated and complex. It operates on 2 different languages. The DNA language, which has 4 letters, A, C, G, and T, and then the language of the amino acids, no, the proteins, I'm sorry, and there are 20 letters in that language, and the only way that DNA can create life, and of course the same DNA molecule is in every living thing, in the cell of every living thing on Earth. It just depends, the difference is how much code there is in that particular life form to create a human or a toad or a oak or whatever. And they can't do anything, DNA can't do anything without deciphering, translating the codes from the 20 letters alphabet over here and the 4-letter alphabet over here. So somehow a translator got put in place. And the translator is our enzymes. And without the enzymes, it wouldn't work at all because the 2 languages can't communicate with each other. So we have 2 sets of languages. We have the translator mechanism, and that is how this DNA is able to work. Problem with DNA is that when Francis Crick, who was the co-discoverer of the double helix shape of the DNA molecule, when he studied the history of DNA, he realized that there was a big problem. That DNA had never changed in the 3.8 billion years that DNA has been on this planet, because there are fossilized bacteria that are exactly like today's bacteria that are 3.8 billion years old. There is no difference between those bacteria. There has never been any other forms of DNA found, and DNA just simply appeared here about 3.8 billion years ago.
I grew up to study the brain because I have a brother who has been diagnosed with a brain disorder, schizophrenia. And as a sister, and later as a scientist, I wanted to understand, why is it that I can take my dreams, I can connect them to my reality, and I can make my dreams come true? What is it about my brother's brain and his schizophrenia that he cannot connect his dreams to a common and shared reality, so they instead become delusion? So I dedicated my career to research into the severe mental illnesses, the biological differences between the brains of individuals who would be diagnosed as normal control, as compared with the brains of individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia, schizoaffective, or bipolar disorder. So we were essentially mapping the microcircuitry of the brain, which cells are communicating with which cells, with which chemicals, and then in what quantities of those chemicals. December 10, 1996, I woke up to discover that I had a brain disorder of my own. A blood vessel exploded in the left half of my brain. Our right hemisphere, it thinks in pictures, and it learns kinesthetically through the movement of our bodies. Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously through all of our sensory systems, and then it explodes into this enormous collage of what this present moment looks like, what this present moment smells like and tastes like, what it feels like, and what it sounds like. I am an energy being connected to the energy all around me through the consciousness of my right hemisphere. We are energy beings connected to one another through the consciousness of our right hemispheres as one human family. And right here, right now, we are brothers and sisters on this planet, here to make the world a better place. And in this moment, we are perfect, we are whole, and we are beautiful. My left hemisphere, our left hemisphere, is a very different place. Our left hemisphere thinks linearly and methodically. Our left hemisphere is all about the past, and it's all about the future. Our left hemisphere is designed to take that enormous collage of the present moment and start picking out details, and more details about those details. It then categorizes and organizes all that information, associates it with everything in the past we've ever learned, and projects into the future all of our possibilities. And our left hemisphere thinks in language. It's that ongoing brain chatter that connects me and my internal world to my external world. It's that little voice that says to me, hey, you got to remember to pick up bananas on your way home. I need them in the morning. It's that calculating intelligence that reminds me when I have to do my laundry. But perhaps most important, it's that little voice that says to me, I am. I am. And as soon as my left hemisphere says to me, I am, I become separate. I become a single, solid individual, separate from the energy flow around me and separate from you. And this is a portion of my brain that I lost on the morning of my stroke. On the morning of the stroke, I woke up to a pounding pain behind my left eye. And it just gripped me. And then it released me. And then it just gripped me. And then it released me. And it was very unusual for me to ever experience any kind of pain. The dialogue inside of my body, I heard a little voice saying, okay, you muscles, you got to contract, and you muscles, you relax. And then I lost my balance, and I'm propped up against the wall. And I looked down at my arm, and I realized that I can no longer define the boundaries of my body. I can't define where I begin and where I end, because the atoms and the molecules of my arm blended with the atoms and molecules of the wall. And all I could detect was this energy. And I'm asking myself, what is wrong with me? What is going on? And in that moment, my brain chatter, my left hemisphere brain chatter, went totally silent. Just like someone took a remote control and pushed the mute button. Total silence. And at first I was shocked to find myself inside of a silent mind. But then I was immediately captivated by the magnificence of the energy around me. And because I could no longer identify the boundaries of my body, I felt enormous and expansive. I felt at one with all the energy that was, and it was beautiful there. And then all of a sudden, my left hemisphere comes back online, and it says to me, hey, we got a problem. We got to get some help. Just right out of the balloon. I just felt my energy lift, and I felt my spirit surrender. And in that moment, I knew that I was no longer the choreographer of my life. And either the doctors rescue my body and give me a second chance at life, or this was perhaps my moment of transition. It took me 8 years to completely recover. So, who are we? We are the life force power of the universe with manual dexterity and 2 cognitive minds. And we have the power to choose moment by moment who and how we want to be in the world. Right here, right now, I can step into the consciousness of my right hemisphere where I am the life force power of the universe. I am the life force power of the 50 trillion beautiful molecular geniuses that make up my form, at one with all that is. Or I can choose to step into the consciousness of my left hemisphere where I become a single individual, a solid, separate from the flow, separate from you. I am Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, intellectual, neuroanatomist. These are the we inside of me. Which would you choose? Which do you choose? And when? I believe that the more time we spend choosing to run the deep inner peace circuitry of our right hemispheres, the more peace we will project into the world, and the more peaceful our planet will be. And I thought that was an idea worth spreading. Thank you.
Look inside your human body. You got 50 trillion citizens. Each cell is an independent living entity sharing one environment. And when you're in health, can you imagine how many individuals that are in that little tiny space? Compared to the number of people on this planet, that makes them look insignificant. And yet they live in harmony. And they're able to share, work together. They have energy exchanges. They exchange an economy of ATP molecules. They support each other. They take care of each other. You want to know how to take care of ourselves and live in the world? Study how cells live in a human cell body. Because all the rules for living there are what we need to live here. And so that the mission of life is not to go through the concept that we live in a random world and God knows what's going to happen tomorrow. I can tell you what's going to happen. Why? The images repeat themselves over time.
Here's the issue. Your cells are in a community. They work together in a coherent group just like the community of people. The moment the air raid siren goes off in the body saying our survival is under threat, then the cells get into the bomb shelter. The problem is most of our stresses are chronic. They're there all the time. And as long as we maintain a chronic stress, then the more stress we maintain, the more cells in my body stay in the bomb shelter and don't come back out. And the relevance is the cells will die, the tissues will undergo a disorganization, and disease will ensue. And the consequence? It wasn't the system. It was the belief that went into it. So the bottom line is stress is the ultimate problem that we face if you got here with good genes. And I said 95 out of 100 got here with good genes. And stress does this. It alters the system. The stress signals come in at the cell membrane and activate the protein pathways, which are respiration, digestion, excretion, etc. But here's the issue. If a cell encounters stress, what can it do? I already mentioned a couple of things. Well, I'll tell you what it can do. Number one, it could wall itself off, go into the bomb shelter. And the question is, yeah, I can survive, but not for a long time doing that. So that's a temporary effect. It's the only thing I can do temporarily. Another thing cells can do is that they can secrete things in their environment to try to make their environment happier. But that's a very expensive process because to change the whole environment, I'm always just wasting energy throwing it out. It's like trying to heat Memphis in the wintertime by opening your window and leaving your heater on, figuring maybe all of Memphis is going to get warm. And the bottom line is, no, that doesn't work either. So the third thing that is possible, now this is real exciting stuff. The third thing that is possible is you can adapt. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means change your genes or change your biology to respond to the stress. Well, what is adaptation in biology today? There is no adaptation in biology. Why? Because we undergo a belief system called Darwinian evolution that says what? That the changes in the genes, the first premise is all gene changes are random. What does that mean? How can I adapt if my genes change randomly? I don't know. Maybe sometimes they'll adapt. Maybe they won't. And the problem is this. Conventional biology has held for years and years and years the belief that when genes change, they only change by accident and randomly so that you can't ever control the outcome of a mutation. And so the consequence of that is Conventional belief then talks about, well, you know those 95 out of 100 people, that, let's say in cancer, in breast cancer, for example, again, 5% of women have a hereditary linkage, 95% of women don't. Yet 95% of these other women who express the cancer alter the genes. So then what do? We go up to the chart and we say, well, the only way you can alter the genes is randomly, so it must have been just a random event. Cancer is random. Well, that's the belief system until we get rid of the assumption that Darwinian evolution is not the way that evolution really occurred, that there is another way. Well, what is that other way? It was first presented in an article called The Origin of Mutants by John Cairns, a British geneticist. Here's what he did. He took bacteria that had a defective enzyme. The enzyme is called lactase. Lactase is an enzyme who breaks down the milk sugar called lactose. And that enzyme is necessary to break down the sugar to extract the energy and the building blocks so the bacteria can use the lactose as a food source to power its growth and division. So these bacteria that Cairns starts with have defective enzymes for lactase. They cannot eat lactose. That's the truth. So he takes these bacteria and he puts them in a petri dish, and the only food he put in the petri dish is lactose. Talk about stress. These little bacteria guys were going, oh man, there's nothing to eat in here. Well, the problem is this. When there's nothing to eat, they can't divide. And when they can't divide, they can't reproduce the DNA, which is generally where the source of the mutations occur. And the result is they can't divide, they can't change the DNA. We expect nothing to happen. And yet, in all the petri dishes, after a few days, there are bacterial colonies growing in every one of them. And the question was that Cairns said, how the heck did that happen? Conventional understanding says that these can't divide because there wasn't any energy, so they can't change the DNA. How did they change the DNA? So when he examined the DNA, what he found was they didn't randomly change a whole bunch of genes. They focused on the genes for lactose, the lactase enzyme, and they changed just the lactase gene, even though they weren't dividing. It was a whole new mechanism, a whole new concept. And the interesting part about it is, when he reported this, the British journal Nature, heresy in evolutionary biology. What's a heresy? Demonstrated that bacteria can choose which mutations they should produce. Then a whole new concept. And the interesting part about it is, they're so upset. And the answer is this. Think how profound it is. If mutations can occur as a result of adapting, then mutations are not necessarily random. And if mutations are not random, then evolution wasn't an accident. We didn't get here by accident. We got here by program. The relevance of this is that we actually got here through a process of creation and evolution simultaneously occurring. That the organisms were pre-adapting to the environment, and the signals in the environment were shaping the organism, so that evolution was not an accident. This is the flow chart, the Darwinian flow chart. How does it work? It says organisms at the top mature and they mate. They create variants in the part of the reproduction phase, which is the belief is when the DNA gets altered. Now, I'm going to show you the new flow chart, and it becomes very relevant for this reason. Yes, organism, and there are three variants in genes. What did they find? That in every nucleus, in every cell in your body, you have genes whose function it is to rewrite the other genes if they encounter stress. So the significance is, then you're capable of rewriting your genes. But here's the most important part. What was not even included in the other chart, but is now included, and it wasn't there before? And the answer is these two boxes right here. The environment and organisms' perception of the environment. Look where the arrows go. What can the environment do? Organisms' perception of the environment. What can it do? It can rewrite your genes, number 4, or it can change your physiological body to respond to the environment. What's the relevance of all this? Well, the environment was never even included in conventional biology. Now the environment is found to be very important, and more so. And look, environment, that's the slide we showed, is the environment. Organisms' perception. We said perception is belief. And what does it affect? The cells. In what way? By rewriting the genes and changing the structure of the cells. The bottom line is this. Your belief in a stressful situation will rewrite your genes to accommodate the stress. And the relevance about that is that if the stressful environment is something that's not even real out there, you will change your biology to fit what you believe. And the issue is this, then specific organs and specific tissues of the body are connected to the beliefs. Specific stresses affect different portions of your body. And as a result, if you understand which portion of your body is affecting the stress, then you can deal with it by understanding what emotions are eliciting that stress. And it's just very critical to understand this, is that the symptoms of your body are your body telling you that you're under stress. That's clear. But the point about stress, because if you're not dealing with it, we're going to have a problem in here. And here's the interesting point. When we go to conventional medical care, what do they do with the symptom? They cover it up. So you don't feel anything anymore. Information can go from protein back into RNA, and we know RNA can go back into DNA, and since the protein is reading the environment, it says that the environment can change the DNA, and this is now becoming a known fact in science as well. So that the information is now going both ways. Why is this important? Because when we go to an OBGYN checkup, if you're pregnant, what is the doctor primarily interested in? Eating right? Do you have enough vitamins? Do you have enough minerals? It's like taking this. What is the role of the mother in conventional belief? Understand this. If the child is developing from the sperm and egg with the genes, and the conventional belief is that all the programming is in the genes, then the mother doesn't provide anything but nutrition. And is this? We know this is not right anymore. We know that the environment can change the genes. So the bottom line is this. The mother is now found to be providing information that the mother is adjusting the genes of the child. But it's not the mother alone. The mother is in cohorts with the father. So as the mother's perception of life is altered, it's usually in tandem with the husband. So it's not just the mother, it's the parents are affecting the offspring in this way. What selects the genes? First part of the lecture. Perception. The embryo is growing in uterus. What is it perceiving? What environment does the embryo perceive? The mother, because it feeds off of the mother's blood. Cool. What does the mother's blood have in it? Of course it has nutrients in it. That's what provides the nutrition. What else does the mother's blood have in it? All the hormones and the molecules that organize her body to respond to the environment that she perceives. So guess what? The fetus is reading that. So the fetus is adjusting to the environment that the mother perceives. Why is that? Because nature is so intelligent. It said if the sperm and egg come together in the middle of Africa or the middle of Chicago. They're two different environments. The two kids are not going to adjust the same in each environment, but the kid has to adjust before it's born. So it turns out that the mother is nature's Head Start program. It helps the child select the genes that will be necessary for that child to survive in the environment because the child is going to live in the environment that the mother perceives. So Nolan Newsweek last year came out and said, where health begins, obesity, cancer, and heart attacks, how your odds are set in the womb. This new understanding of the child are dying to immediately be adapted to that environment that the mother lives in. However, since perceptions are beliefs, and since beliefs are not necessarily accurate, the parents' perceptions are genetically selecting, or genetic selection mechanisms for the child. Parents are genetic engineers. They're selecting genes. In an environment that's threatening, perception system is activated. In a supportive environment, growth is activated. Here's an embryo. The organs and tissues that develop in relationship to the amount of blood they receive. The more blood they receive, the more better their development. Simple, obvious nourishment growth process. IQ potential is determined by the prenatal environment based on the perception of the mother during pregnancy. And that says, look at the way we raise kids today. Look at parents in inner city situations. Look at parents that are single parents that don't know whether they'll be able to provide for their child and for themselves. These parents live under high stress. When they live under high stress, the stress hormones cross the placenta and impact the child, selecting genes which alter the development and evolution of that child, as you haven't given attention to the reality that the child is being programmed genetically in utero in response to the mother's perception of the environment.
There's a power that lives within every human that walks this earth. It's a language of human emotion. And the power of human emotion that we typically discount in our culture, not so in other cultures, but in our culture. The power of that emotion to literally change the conditions that we're talking about, the conditions of the healing within our bodies. And what the experiments are showing is that this power of emotion has the ability to influence not only our bodies biologically, but beyond our bodies into the physical world on the quantum level. It is a powerful language that other cultures apparently know very well. And in the West, when science came in, science discounted the effects of things that cannot be seen and measured directly 400 years ago. And now they're coming back full circle with the language of quantum science, reincorporating these forces, but the feeling and the emotion and the power of human emotion is among those forces that cannot be seen. The laboratory experiments are documenting the fact, and it is a fact now, that human emotion changes the DNA inside of our bodies and the way we function in this world, and that those effects extend beyond our bodies into the physical matter of the people in the world around us when we learn that language. And it leads us to the understanding that science is simply a language that describes our relationship to ourselves, to one another, to our world, to the universe beyond it. It's a language that describes, in very technical terms, how things work, the mechanics, the nuts and bolts, and how we function within that mechanism that we call life in the universe. The best scientists will freely admit that our science is incomplete. There are a lot of things science simply cannot explain right now. But what if we take the best of the science that we do know and marry that with the languages that have always been here, the languages of spirituality, and those indigenous understandings that tell us we're part of this world and we're part of one another, we're part of a greater creation. We're not separate from these things. What if we marry those two ways of knowing into a greater wisdom? Where will that lead us? The line between science and spirituality is getting very fuzzy, and especially in the language of quantum physics. And if we can flesh out those missing pieces, and it helps us to become better people and create a better world, why wouldn't we want to do that? We already know what it's like to have a world where we all feel separate and we feel like there's not enough to go around. It's a world based in competition. We know where that world has led so far. Let's try something different. What would happen if we embrace one another in a spirit of cooperation like all of the rest of the natural world does, humankind? This is the only species that believes that violent competition is the optimum way to get ahead. In traditions, there was a sect called the Essenes, E-S-S-E-N-E-S. They wrote entire texts about how we get through those times in our lives, and they said what we do is we bless the things that hurt us. When we bless the things that hurt us, we're actually acknowledging, bringing that forward, just saying, yes, it happened, and then that allows them to work through that energy and to transcend the energy. When you bless something long enough, it's just something that everyone has to experience on their own. It actually changes chemically what happens in our bodies. And when we understand that the world around us, and this is the language of quantum physics, when the world around us, we understand it's nothing more and nothing less than a mirror of what we have become from within. Our anger, our hate, our rage, our jealousy as individuals is mirrored around us, and collectively our love, our compassion, our forgiveness, our understanding. So I think this is the generation that gets to learn that new way of being and embrace. And I think about the experiments, and the evidence is out there showing that the emotions that we hold in here become the physical reality in the world around. They literally turn the atoms off and on of the stuff that our world and our bodies are made of. And that is a huge statement to make, and it's a very, very empowering way to look at the world. When we choose peace and healing and love and compassion and forgiveness and understanding and tolerance in our hearts, we know that that changes the chemistry in our bodies and we're healthier. That's a fact. We also know that those changes extend to the world around us, into our communities and families in ways that can be measured, and that's a fact. And with those two facts, I think that we can move on in this 21st century and not let the frightening conditions of the world disempower us. We can look at that world square in the eye and say, yes, these things have happened, but there's a power within us, and maybe we'll outgrow the need for war.